straight upstairs.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
It was a cold October night in St. Paul, Minnesota. On the quiet stretch of Pierce Street, everything seemed to be winding down for the day, until the silence was shattered by a woman's piercing scream from the second floor of an old apartment building. A neighbor jolted awake, heart pounding. Pressing his ear against the wall, he could clearly hear the chaos next door. Someone was yelling, "I'm going to kill you!" Without hesitation, he called 911. His voice trembled on the call. "Someone's beating a girl. I hear them arguing. I'm scared she's going to die."
911, where's the emergency?
Hey, I'm gonna be honest with you. Somebody's just beating out of this girl right now. I need somebody to come up.
Okay, what address are you at, please?
Pierce Street.
Okay, and is it happening in the same building where you are?
Yeah, right above us. Second floor. Listen, I'll let you into the building just like good. I just need somebody to get up there and just tell them back to shut off because someone's going crazy.
Do you hear a male and female voice?
Yeah, I a male, and it's definitely one aggressive male. And then I don't know if it's a girl we know lives there. I don't know.
Okay, but it sounds physical. Did you hear any mention of weapons? Did you hear any mention of weapons?
No, I hear him saying he's going to kill somebody. Can you get somebody over here, please?
I'm getting a call started, sir. All right, how long has it been happening?
I don't know. It woke me up 10 minutes ago.
Okay, and what's your phone number?
I'm not giving you my phone number.
Okay, well, you said you let the officers in, so you're going to watch for them then?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And you said it's on the 7th floor, but you don't know which apartment number?
Second floor.
Okay.
Like, time is of the essence here. He's
banging. The call is in.
Thanks, Cole.
I understand. The call is in. I'm just adding information to the call. Officers are going to want to know what they're walking into, okay?
Minutes later, St. Paul officers arrived at the scene. They moved quickly, knocking, then banging on the apartment door. No response. Inside, there was a chilling silence. After a moment of hesitation, they forced entry. What they saw stunned even the most seasoned officers. A small boy, no older than 2, stood motionless in the middle of the blood-soaked living room. His face and clothes were smeared with blood. Near him, the lifeless body of a young woman lay face down on the floor. Blood splattered across the walls, soaked into the carpet, and pooled beneath her. The man arrested at the scene was Terrian Sherman, 23, the woman's boyfriend. He didn't flee or resist arrest, but instead screamed incoherently, "I need a doctor. I can't breathe. I killed the dog. I don't know what happened." The victim was Abigail Simpson, 21 years old, a first-year law student at a local university. She had recently moved in with Terrian. Her classmates described her as intelligent, soft-spoken, and deeply passionate about becoming a lawyer who defended abused women. The cruel irony was unbearable. Abigail had become a victim of the very violence she hoped to fight against. The case sent shockwaves through the community. News stations picked up the story almost instantly. Online, the hashtag #JusticeForAbigail began trending, paired with smiling photos of the young woman whose future had been so brutally stolen. But what troubled investigators the most wasn't just the savagery of the killing, it was the mystery behind it. There were no signs of forced entry, no weapons stolen, no evidence suggesting anyone else had been involved. Was this a sudden act of violence, or the result of long-simmering conflict and control? No one truly knew what happened inside that apartment, except Terrian Sherman and the 2-year-old boy who stood in the wreckage. As the interrogation began, layers of truth slowly started to unravel. As officers stepped into the apartment, the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and overwhelming dread. In one corner of the room lay Abigail Simpson, face down, motionless, her features unrecognizable from the brutal wounds. Blood had soaked through the wooden floor, staining everything in sight. A veteran officer froze momentarily before kneeling to check her pulse. She was gone. The room was eerily silent, broken only by the soft cries of a toddler, barely 2 years old, standing against the wall. His face and clothes were smeared in blood. An officer gently picked him up, reassuring the child while signaling for EMTs. Nearby sat Terrian Sherman, Abigail's boyfriend, collapsed on the floor. His hands trembled violently, eyes wide and unfocused. He mumbled incoherently, "I don't know. I can't breathe. I need meds. I killed it. The dog. I killed the dog." Sherman was immediately handcuffed and escorted outside. He didn't resist but appeared like an empty shell, head bowed, his body slumped forward. At moments, he would scream uncontrollably, then fall into a chilling silence. In the backseat of the patrol car, Terrian continued rambling, locked in an emotional freefall. He kept asking, "Am I going to jail? Is this real? Who died? Did someone die?" But when directly asked about Abigail, his eyes darted away in avoidance. During the ride to the station, Terrian suddenly burst into tears and blurted out, "I need a doctor. I'm not okay. Did I just kill Abigail? I didn't mean to." Inside the interrogation room, after receiving basic medical attention and calming down slightly, Sherman became more lucid. Detectives kept the tone light, aiming to get his initial version of events. His statement remained fragmented, but puzzle pieces began to emerge. Sherman claimed that, earlier that evening, he and Abigail had argued about money. She wanted him to get a job, stop relying on handouts, and stick to his rehab schedule. "She kept pushing me, kept trying to change me," he repeated several times. He added that he felt controlled, disrespected, and said she made him feel worthless. "She didn't see me like she used to," kept saying I didn't deserve this life. One detective grew increasingly suspicious. Terrian's words were emotionally charged, but vague. He avoided specifics about what happened that night. When asked directly, "How many times did you stab Abigail?" Sherman clutched his head and screamed, "I don't remember. I don't know what happened. I need my meds. I'm having an episode." The interrogation paused. Officers gave him water and let him breathe. They began suspecting drug influence or acute psychosis. Still, they couldn't ignore the underlying possibility. This wasn't just a mental break. It might be premeditated. Detectives launched parallel investigations. They reviewed phone records, texts, and social activity from the past week. Alarmingly, Abigail had texted a friend that very morning. "I'm leaving soon. I can't take it anymore. I'm scared he might do something crazy." The friend was brought in for questioning. She explained that Abigail had shared growing fears. Terrian, she said, had been controlling, restricting who Abigail could talk to, demanding her passwords, and banning male friends entirely. Abigail had tried to leave him once before but returned, believing in his promises to change. But things only got worse with time. None of this, however, appeared in Terrian's first statement. He insisted they were in love, that Abigail understood me, and repeated, "I didn't mean to kill her." When asked, if it wasn't intentional, how did she end up with over 30 stab wounds? Sherman panicked again. "I don't remember. Maybe I lost control." A seasoned officer who specialized in domestic abuse cases commented, "He's building a victim narrative, someone pushed to the edge, lost in a moment. But the evidence isn't backing him up." Another detail couldn't be overlooked. Hallway surveillance recorded at least 15 minutes of shouting before police arrived. There were no sounds of a man being attacked, only a woman screaming in terror, things crashing, and heavy footfalls. One chilling quote from Sherman's statement raised red flags. "I just wanted it all to stop. I was tired of being treated like a loser. I told her, I warned her." This hinted at a long-standing rage, not a sudden outburst. While the medical examiner worked on Abigail's autopsy and forensics combed through the scene, detectives knew this was just the beginning. They needed to break down every contradiction, every hole in Terrian's story. One thing was certain. What Sherman said in his initial statement was only a fraction of the horror that unfolded that night. After Terrian Sherman's incoherent and contradictory initial statements, investigators at the St. Paul Police Department knew they were dealing with a complex and potentially dangerous suspect. His erratic behavior, combined with the extreme violence inflicted on the victim, left no room for the theory of a spontaneous outburst. They needed to dig deeper, starting with the science. Forensics were called in that very night. The apartment was sealed off, and every square inch was photographed and examined. Bloodied footprints revealed movement between the living room and bedroom after Abigail was already dead. A crucial discovery. A broken knife blade under the couch, still coated in clotted blood, was later confirmed to match the clean handle found in the kitchen drawer. Abigail had suffered 33 stab wounds, primarily to the head, face, and neck. One forensic pathologist noted, "This isn't a defensive act or a momentary lapse. This was intentional, sustained, and fueled by extreme rage." Investigators also discovered a blood-soaked set of men's clothing stuffed behind the washing machine, likely belonging to Terrian. This indicated that after the murder, he had the presence of mind to change clothes and hide the evidence. A direct contradiction to his earlier claim, "I don't remember anything. I was in shock." As physical evidence painted a clearer picture, detectives turned their attention to other sources, security footage and witness statements. The apartment hallway had 24/7 surveillance. At 8:48 p.m., the footage showed Abigail calmly entering the building alone, carrying takeout food and some college textbooks. She appeared composed, without signs of distress. 45 minutes later, a neighbor placed a 911 call reporting yelling, screaming, and sounds of a struggle. Footage from earlier that morning also showed Terrian leaving the apartment alone and walking toward a nearby pharmacy. Medical records later revealed he had been prescribed anti-anxiety and antipsychotic medications, but had not refilled or attended follow-ups for over 3 weeks. His physician confirmed that abruptly stopping his meds could lead to severe behavioral instability, especially given Terrian's known history of substance abuse. At this stage, the investigation split in two. One team focused on psychiatric evaluations to assess potential diminished capacity. Another team delved into motive and behavior, increasingly convinced this was not just a mental breakdown, but a calculated act. They started with the texts. Abigail's phone, recovered from under the bed, held hundreds of messages exchanged with friends, her mother, and classmates. Some texts, sent just hours before her death, stood out. "He's snapping again, probably using again. I feel like I'm living with a ticking time bomb. If I don't get out of here by the weekend, I don't know what might happen." One chilling message sent early that morning hit investigators hard. "I told him I wanted to leave. He went quiet for a bit, then smiled. But it wasn't normal. It was the scariest smile I've ever seen." With that, detectives scheduled a second interview. Terrian, now calmer but more guarded, sat across from the lead investigator. He was no longer crying or screaming, but speaking in short, evasive sentences. Detectives presented photos of the crime scene and asked, "You say you don't remember anything. Then why was the broken knife blade found under the couch while the clean handle was in the kitchen drawer? Who put it there?" Sherman dropped his gaze. I don't know. Maybe I did it, but I wasn't aware." They showed him the bloodied clothes hidden behind the washer. "You hid these. Do you remember?" After a long pause, he said, "No, I honestly don't remember." The lead investigator leaned in, voice steady. "Did you know Abigail was planning to leave you? She packed a bag. She texted her best friend saying she was scared of you." Terrian finally looked up, his eyes flickering with something the detectives couldn't quite name. Surprise? Guilt? Panic?
"If you move, I'ma kill you."
I think that's a quote.
That's what I said to that dog before I killed that boy. I had to kill that dog. A real, live dog. What the It was a girl, but it was a boy. I need my meds. I need my meds. I need my meds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here.
I'm tripping. I just killed the dog.
What did you think was happening up there?
I heard, because I've heard her, cause I've gone up there before, and just kind of heard, and it's all been her. She'd been to me it sounded like she was throwing shit, slaying, clearing off, you know what I mean, when you're pissed, let it all out.
Yep.
And he'd just been kind of steady taking it, calling her crazy or something. It seemed, yeah. And that's why I heard in the past. And then today, so I'm it's just that, just a really freaky inconvenience. So I let it go for her, And then we hear the bang, you're mad. And it was somebody, he's he's beating shit out of her.
You thought that he was beating the shit out of her?
Yeah, we thought that at least.
Yep, so that's what you guys thought when you heard what was going on. I mean, it was pretty loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were yelling, but we didn't know, I don't know exactly what phrases or names. I stepped outside, I went outside of our apartment building, into the hallway, and I just heard, I was man, it was very repetitive. Whatever he was saying, guys are tweaking out and stuff, whether you just have psychotic mental breaks or something.
Do you remember anything that he said? I mean, Bryce said you might have thought you heard him saying something.
Just like
Violent stuff at all, or no? Did you hear him make threats, or did you hear him?
I don't remember any specific threat necessarily.
What did you hear when you said that?
I just heard a bunch of banging.
Banging?
Yeah, walls were rattling and stuff.
Like, you thought they were fighting?
Yeah, I definitely do. I pretty much knew they were fighting because I just heard it was loud. Everything was banging around up there. Every wall was like hitting stuff, and it was like a different sound every time. I was honestly like, I don't know. I knew shit was going out there. I don't know if they had a gun or how thin the floors were or whatever. So I was like trying to move away from where I was hearing commotion at upstairs. So I just didn't know what was going to happen.
So there was moving all around the apartment?
And I swear, like, at the beginning, she was, like, in the room, and he was out here dealing with someone. He'd come back to the room and yell at her more.
Wait, when you say back to, like, the
Yeah, in the back bedroom.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I could hear her more than Sylvia at the beginning, before all, like, when the yelling was going on before the banging.
But at the start, you think she was in that back bedroom?
Yeah, gotcha.
Tyrion looked up at the investigator, his eyes hollow, as if yanked from some mental fog. He didn't deny that Abigail was planning to leave him, but he didn't confirm it either. He muttered, She never said anything to me. We were fine. The detectives knew this was a turning point. This was when they needed to pierce through his defenses using small but strategic details. They shifted to a psychological tactic, making the suspect realize that every lie was already unraveling. They asked about the argument that night. You say you don't remember anything, but the building's security cameras picked up screaming that lasted nearly 20 minutes. Neighbors in 3 different units heard it. So if nothing happened, why was Abigail screaming for her life loud enough for the whole floor to hear? Tyrion didn't respond. The silence in the room grew thick and heavy. Then suddenly, he spoke, but in a different direction. I thought she was cheating. I wasn't sure, but maybe she was texting someone. The detectives weren't surprised. This was a classic redirection, blaming the victim to reduce his own accountability. But they went along, ready to pull the thread further. Did you see any texts? Any proof? Tyrion shook his head. No, but I felt it. I just felt it. The officer struck back. Feelings aren't facts, and feelings don't justify stabbing someone 33 times. She was still living with you. She bought dinner that night. She texted her mom that she'd call tomorrow. So, who's really lying here? Tyrion began sweating. His voice noticeably weakened. He pulled his hands from the table and cradled his head, whispering, I tried. I really did. At that point, the detectives brought up the 2-year-old child, Tyrion's son, who had been present at the scene. Your son was there. What do you think he's going to remember when he's older? A blood-covered room? A woman motionless on the floor, and his father screaming and losing control. That broke something inside Tyrion. He choked on his own breath and began sobbing uncontrollably. Between gasps, he said, I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't want. I didn't mean. The investigator didn't soften. This was the time to go deeper, not back off. Didn't mean to? Then why did Abigail contact a domestic violence support center twice last month? She emailed them asking how to safely leave a dangerous relationship. And it was true. Police had confirmed that Abigail reached out to a local nonprofit, requesting guidance. In her messages, she described feeling watched, controlled, and threatened if she tried to leave. Tyrion dropped his head onto the table again, silent for more than a minute. The officers let the silence hang. They knew that this pause was critical. Either the suspect would crack, or he'd double down. But either way, the wall was beginning to crumble. She didn't understand me, Tyrion said quietly. I tried, I really did, but she made me feel useless, like I wasn't a man. This was a crucial shift, the first time Tyrion directly admitted resentment toward Abigail, without blaming medication or mental health. The investigator leaned in. Feeling hurt isn't a crime. Acting on that hurt and taking someone's life? That's murder. What did you choose, Tyrion? Tyrion looked up, his eyes bloodshot, voice shaking. I don't know. I don't know who I was in that moment. The officer then placed one final photo on the table, a picture of Abigail and Tyrion's son taken at a park 2 weeks earlier. They were both smiling in the sun. You had a family, a woman who loved you even knowing your past, and a child who needed his father. And now, all that's left is blood and silence. The room went still. Tyrion breathed heavily, eyes full of tears. Then, in a near whisper, He said, I didn't think she'd die. I just wanted her to stop. The moment Terrian whispered, I just wanted her to stop, it wasn't just an emotional outburst. It was a slip. To the investigators, it was the first sign of a motive slipping through, cloaked beneath layers of confusion and denial. They didn't confront him directly. Instead, they allowed the silence to settle. Then they shifted the interrogation into a slower, deeper rhythm, aiming not to provoke, but to disarm. So what made you lose control, Terrian? What happened in your head at that moment? He didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and said, I thought she was mocking me. She said I was useless, that nobody wanted me, that I'd never change. Did she really say that, or is that what you heard? The investigator asked, calmly but firmly. Terrian hesitated. His lips trembled. Finally, he answered, I don't know anymore. It was a subtle but damning admission that perhaps what he perceived was not reality, that the events unfolding in his mind were driven by paranoia, distortion, or deep-seated resentment. But regardless of the reason, the result remained. A woman was dead. At that moment, investigators laid out new evidence, the full forensic report. They described in detail how Abigail's first wound was a deep stab to the temple, likely disabling her instantly. What followed were dozens of blows to her face, neck, and scalp, most delivered while she was already face down and motionless. This wasn't a struggle, Terrian. This wasn't self-defense. This was rage. You attacked her where she couldn't fight back. Terrian didn't argue, but his hands clenched into fists, trembling on the table. Next, detectives asked, after killing her, you changed clothes. You hid the bloodied ones. You left your son standing in the middle of the crime scene. Were you in shock, or were you thinking clearly? Again, Terrian didn't deny it. He no longer fought back with excuses. He simply muttered, I just wanted to disappear. The investigator locked eyes with him. Disappear? But you're still here. You survived. You tried to run from guilt, but not from the truth. And right now, you have a choice. Face what you did, or keep hiding from yourself. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a tactic. It was a final push, psychological, personal. In many violent crime cases, it's not the aggressive pressure, but the quiet truth that breaks through. Terrian looked up and quietly asked, if I admit everything, what will they do to me? The question wasn't a confession, but it was the last step before one. Detectives knew he was standing on the edge, no longer defending, just drifting. An officer replied gently, you'll have a lawyer. But what happens next depends on the truth, not the lies. And your son, he'll grow up and want to know what really happened. Do you want him to hear it from strangers, or from you? For the first time since his arrest, Terrian Sherman bowed his head and whispered, I'm sorry. Not a full confession, not a detailed admission. But in the world of criminal investigation, sometimes a quiet, timely apology speaks louder than any signed statement. At that point, detectives decided to pause the interview. They had almost everything: conflicting statements, forensic inconsistencies, threatening messages, concealment of evidence, and most importantly, a deeply rooted emotional trigger that had boiled over into lethal violence. Terrian Sherman wasn't just someone who lost control. He was a ticking emotional time bomb, warned, treated, given chances, but who ultimately chose to destroy someone else rather than change himself. And while he hadn't signed a confession yet, the truth had never been clearer. After hours of exhaustive interrogation, the investigation had reached its final stage, where truth could no longer be hidden, and the suspect could no longer escape behind shaky denials. The pieces of the puzzle were nearly complete, but to close the case, detectives needed one final turning point, a confession or an irrefutable blow that would shatter any remaining resistance. That turning point arrived with the final forensic report delivered to the investigators that same afternoon. What seemed like a minor detail carried massive weight. Skin cells were found under Abigail's fingernails, consistent with someone trying to fight back. DNA analysis confirmed it was a match to Terrian Sherman. This meant that Abigail was fully conscious and aware during the initial assault. She recognized her attacker. She tried to resist. She fought back, but lost. Her awareness at the time of attack completely dismantled Terrian's claim that he didn't know what he was doing. Investigators chose not to present this evidence outright. Instead, they let Terrian walk himself into a corner. They brought him back into the interview room, not with a barrage of questions, but with a single video, a recorded video call between Abigail and her mother, made just 24 hours before the murder. In the video, Abigail smiles faintly, but her voice is strained. "Mom, I'm okay. I'm trying to figure out how to leave. I'm not telling him yet until I have a place lined up. But I know, this time, I have to go." Terrian stared at the screen. His expression stiffened. No panic, no confusion, just one reaction: betrayal. "She was going to leave me," he whispered. "She said she wouldn't go." Detectives then presented another image, a small suitcase hidden in the back of the closet where Abigail had begun packing. Inside were apartment applications, a part-time job offer, and a therapy intake form. "She didn't want to hurt you, Terrian," one officer said. "She just wanted to live." That was the blow that cracked him open. Terrian broke into sobs, struggling to breathe. He pounded his fists against his chest and screamed, "Why didn't she tell me? I could have changed." But it was already too late. This was when the detectives gave him one final opportunity. "You have the right to remain silent, but the evidence speaks for itself. The only thing missing is your words. Not because we need them, but because your son deserves to know who his father really was. A killer, or a man who took responsibility." The room went silent. Terrian dropped his head onto the table, no words. But then his hand reached out and signed the statement, a full confession to the murder of Abigail Simpson. In his detailed confession, Terrian recounted what happened the night of the murder. When Abigail told him she was leaving, he felt empty and hopeless. Rage built when he saw her packing. They argued. She slapped him. He shoved her to the ground. "I went to the kitchen. I don't know why. But when I came back, she looked at me, and I don't remember anything after that. I just remember standing in a pool of blood." It was a blurred memory, but investigators already knew the killing wasn't instantaneous. It lasted more than 10 minutes, confirmed by hallway audio recordings, blood patterns, and forensic timelines. In the final paragraph of his written statement, Terrian wrote, "I can't go back. I can't undo it. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my son. I'm sorry to Abigail's parents. I don't deserve forgiveness." This confession, combined with physical evidence, forensic analysis, psychological evaluations, and witness testimony, closed the case completely. Terrian Sherman was formally charged with second-degree intentional murder under Minnesota law, with aggravating factors including the presence of a minor at the scene and the brutality of the attack. Prosecutors announced they would seek the maximum penalty. The trial was scheduled for later that month, but from the moment the confession was signed, justice had already taken its course. The trial of Terrian Sherman officially began in late October, just 3 weeks after the murder. Throughout the proceedings, the defendant remained mostly silent. He spoke only once when the judge asked, "Do you have anything to say to the victim's family?" Terrian stood up, his voice shaking. "I have no words that could undo what I've done. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want everyone to know I once loved her." His words did not sway the jury. In less than an hour, they returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of second-degree intentional murder, with aggravating circumstances due to the brutality of the act and the presence of a minor at the scene. The judge issued the sentence: 40 years in prison without parole, a term nearing the maximum allowed under Minnesota law. "The price of control is losing everything," the judge concluded, leaving the courtroom in complete silence. Abigail's family was present throughout the trial. Her mother, Helen Simpson, clutched a photo of her daughter for the entire session. When she addressed the court, her voice held no anger, only sorrow. "We didn't just lose a daughter. We lost the belief that love could redeem someone. Abigail loved him. She hoped. She gave him chances, and in return, she got blood, blades, and death." Her father, Mark Simpson, kept it brief. No one should die for trying to help someone they love. That single sentence brought many in the courtroom to tears. After the sentencing, Abigail's case dominated local headlines and sparked conversations among advocacy groups for women's safety. Dozens of editorials followed, with headlines like "Love Doesn't Cure Violence," "Kindness Paid in Blood," and "When Did We Start Abandoning Women Like Abigail?" A scholarship fund was created in Abigail's name at her university, awarded to law students committed to supporting victims of domestic violence. That same year, the city of St. Paul approved a new policy for monitoring individuals with a history of abuse or mental illness, requiring stricter reintegration assessments and mandatory mental health evaluations. Abigail's story didn't end in the courtroom. It became a wake-up call for the community. Loving someone isn't enough to change them, especially when they refuse to change themselves. To those who knew her, Abigail's legacy wasn't her death. It was her courage, her voice, her attempt to escape, and her hope for a better life. She didn't die because she was weak. She died because she was too patient with someone who didn't deserve her.